1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock.
Well, Lordy, 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 Miss Lordy.
Well, my ma said to me, your hair's too long.
She's a mom, she's a mom. Hey, how is the air up there? How is the air up there? Come with me, we'll be gone. Join our hands and sing a song.
Hey! Hey!
Watch out, young love. It's a loser's game.
1905, you won your battle with life.
Take me to the Aeroflot and Cuba.
Asian cigarettes. Just give me one free night a week. That's all I really need.
I don't know where I'm going to. I don't know where I'm going to. I got you. That's all I want.
Mid-50s, a new music form emerged in the southern states of the USA. Rock and roll, a fusion of country and western, the popular music of poor southern whites, and rhythm and blues, the dance music of black Americans. Given the widespread segregation of the time, it was an unlikely combination. And indeed the term rock and roll itself dated back a few years to 1951, coined by white disc jockey Alan Freed, a rhythm and blues enthusiast. In 1955, rock and roll escaped the confines of the South and swept right across the United States, and by year's end had drifted across the Atlantic.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. Put your glad right on. Join me high. Have some fun when the clock strikes one. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. We're going to rock, 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 till bright daylight. Rock, gonna rock around the clock tonight. When the clock strikes 2, 3, and 4, if the band goes down, yell for more. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, 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 bright daylight. Gonna rock around the clock tonight. Well,
In New Zealand, however, community standards remained conservative. The New Zealand Broadcasting Service refused to play rock and roll. Many New Zealanders saw it as the devil's music coming into the country. In the mid-1950s, New Zealand's popular music sounded like this.
I'm up for the crazy dolphin. The kids think I'm mighty. When I give them all a fishy back right and a game of 4 in the swishy tide. I'm one fish that'll never get fried and served in batter for tea. And I live at Opanoni by the sea.
In the mid-50s, New Zealand's isolation still ensured that few international performers ventured to these shores. With air travel still to be refined, transport into the country was mostly by sea, and because of the great distance, few British or American entertainers bothered with the South Pacific. New Zealand was left to its own devices, with trends and fashions lagging 5, 10 years behind the times. To visitors, New Zealand was, well, quaint. The people were friendly, the scenery was stunning, and the country was stuck at the bottom of the globe. New Zealanders often had an inferiority complex. The colonial mentality ruled, and if the Kiwis could hold their own in the sports arena, on the concert stage, New Zealand entertainers were only as good as the audience allowed. Standards were gauged along the lines of good for New Zealand. Local artists such as Pat McMinn, the Four Lads, and the numerous Maori show bands enjoyed considerable popularity, but no one really expected them to shake the world. Given this situation, there were very few local recordings up to the mid-50s, and in fact had not been in any New Zealand record releases until 1948, when a radio manufacturing company, the Radio Corporation of New Zealand, branched out and built a recording studio and record pressing plant. The Radio Corp's record label was called Tanza, to assist New Zealand artists, and their first release was called Blue Smoke, by the Ruru Karatiana Quintet.
Blue smoke goes drifting by into the deep blue sky. When I think of home, I sadly sigh. Oh, I can see you there with loving tears in your eyes as we fondly said our last goodbyes. And as I sail away with the longing to stay, I promise to be true and to love only you. Blue smoke goes drifting by into the deep blue skies. My memories of home will never die.
The success of Ruru Karatiana's Blue Smoke prompted Tanza to release further local recordings, and they were followed by a second New Zealand label, Zodiac, owned by Auckland recording pioneer Eldred Stebbing. Zodiac too enjoyed considerable success, encouraging the multinational HMV to throw its support behind local entertainers. For more than 20 years, HMV had monopolised the New Zealand record industry without once attempting to record local artists. With Tanza and Zodiac paving the way, HMV had to change their policy to justify their existence. It was, in fact, HMV who were to give the burgeoning industry its first huge hit. Fred Smith, who was employed by the HMV sales division at the time, recalls the impact of Johnny Cooper's One by One.
Johnny Cooper did this song One by One, and that was the best-selling single of all times in New Zealand. It topped the 89,000. In those days, a good single sold 40,000, 50,000 copies.
One by one we broke each vow we made. It was you who lied, it was me who paid. As sure as there's a heaven beyond the sun, we'll pay for our lives one by one. My plans and hopes have tumbled down. My castle of dreams plunged to the ground. How can you face me after what you've done? You've shattered my dreams one by one. One by one we broke each vow we made. It was you who lied, it was me who paid. As sure as there's a heaven beyond the sun, we'll pay for our lives one by one.
By 1955, Johnny Cooper, the 27-year-old Maori cowboy from Wairoa in Hawke's Bay, was clearly New Zealand's most successful recording artist. Although Cooper did, in fact, write much of his own material, HMV dictated which songs were released, and they were mostly covers of overseas hits. Songs such as One by One, Shifting Whispering Sands, and The Convict and the Rose were all overseas compositions. In what was to become standard record company practice right through to the late 60s, local artists often recorded overseas hits, which were then released before the originals. In June 1955, Johnny Cooper was given a copy of a disc which was taking the world by storm, Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock. Cooper looks back on his first rock and roll recording session.
Well, at that time I was recording for HMV Studios in Wellington. The chap in charge of the recording studio said, we've got a new sound that's taking America by storm. It's by some country group called Bill Haley and the Comets. I had to listen to it, and really it wasn't my thing, you know. They said, well, could you make the record for us and we'll release your version of it and hold back the Bill Haley version? We got the jazz musicians in Wellington at the time. They really enjoyed it, but I don't really think they knew the type of music, but they just let it go anyway and had a good time. I didn't know what I was singing about because it was a brand new type of sound, you know, so it was pretty hard to do, you know. It's sort of miming, in other words, really, to another record.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We'll put your glad rags on. Join behind, we're gonna have some fun. When the clock strikes 1, we're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock till the broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. When the clock strikes 2, 3, and 4, if the band goes down, we'll yell for more. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock till the broad daylight. Gonna rock around the clock tonight, baby.
Released in September 1955, Johnny Cooper's version of Rock Around the Clock sold steadily for a year and a half, until in August 56, accompanied by Rock Around the Clock the movie, the Bill Haley original was released. Overnight, New Zealand went rock and roll crazy. Teenagers adopted new modes of dress, language, and above all, dance movements. Teenagers were no longer young adults, but an age group unto themselves, with their own lifestyle to pursue. Rock and roll had a lot to answer for. Jukeboxes were soon carrying Bill Haley and Elvis Presley selections, and radio played a little. Dismissed by the older generation as a fad, condemned by the prudes and sniffed at by most dancehall musicians, there were, however, further local efforts to recreate this new American music. Johnny Cooper continued his flirtation with rock and roll, his confidence growing with each new recording. But Cooper lacked the kind of identifiable image to become a teenage idol.
Well, I saw my baby walking with another man today. Well, I saw my baby walking with another man today. Well, I asked her, what's the matter? This is what I heard her say. See you later, alligator. After a while, crocodile. We were jumping all night to the beat, beat, then we hurried down the road for something to eat. We were rocking and rolling and making around when along came a cop and said, we've gone now. We said, listen here, man, don't you understand? We got the fight, got rock and roll. We got the fight, got rock, fight, got roll, fight, got rock and roll. My gal, I set my bucket down. She said, hi there, Johnny, how you going to town? I said, no, no, baby, how's it going where it's scratch? I'll meet you in a minute at the blackberry patch. She grabs her bucket and she jumps and squeals. I'm heading for the bushes and she's hot on my heels. I start picking on one end, she picks on the other. We meet in the middle and she yells, oh, brother, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie. Oh, I love that gal when it's blackberry picking time. Take it out, son.
It was from Wanganui that New Zealand's first real rock and roll hero would emerge. In 1957, Johnny Devlin was an 18-year-old bank clerk, making a name for himself on the Central North Island talent quest circuit. He might have remained there at the bank, something of a local celebrity, if he hadn't attracted the attention of who else but Johnny Cooper. Cooper on discovering Johnny Devlin.
Well, I put on a minimum 2 wide talent quest, and he appeared with his group. He was so keen that after the show he'd used to take his group out in the foyer and perform out there when the people were leaving, and he was aiming for the top. It was good to see.
Word soon spread about Cooper's discovery, and before long Johnny Devlin was packing him out in Dannevirke, Foxton and Palmerston North. Johnny Devlin recalls those early days.
Johnny actually took me under his wing and gave me the title of New Zealand's answer to Elvis Presley. So I started learning off all of Elvis's songs, and virtually my whole act consisted of Elvis Presley, a complete Elvis Presley imitation and only Elvis songs. Clothes, I ended up getting some Ming blue coats made, white narrow-bottom trousers, blue suede shoes, that type of thing.
Treat me like a fool, treat me mean and cruel, but love me. Take my faithful heart, tear it all apart, but love me. If you ever go, darling, I'll be so lonely, begging on my knees. All I ask is please, please love me. I would beg and steal just to feel beating close to mine. If you ever go, darling, I'd be so lonely. I'd be sad and blue, crying over you, dear old me.
Spurred on by his provincial success, in December 1957, Johnny Devlin moved to Auckland, where he came to the attention of Dave Dunningham, a proprietor of a teenage dance venue, the Jive Centre. It was from here that Johnny Devlin launched his phenomenal career. He looks back on those first frantic nights at the Jive Centre.
There were a lot of screams from the girls, and of course this to me was quite a new thing. Well, it was a completely new thing to me, and the first thing I thought that I'd left my fly undone or something like that, so I sort of turned around to check that out. It was just a sort of hysteria thing, I should imagine. I think it was from that Dave sort of saw the potential, saw the potential that I did have, and that's when he offered me the permanent weekend work at the Jive Centre. I was singing there one night, and a chap came over in the middle of the dance floor with his hands cupped over his ears, and I thought, my God, I hope I don't sound that bad. But then after I'd finished, Dave introduced me to this chap whose name was Philip Warren.
Phil Warren, himself a teenager, had in 1956 formed his own record company, Prestige. He snapped up Devlin, and neither of them ever looked back. Phil Warren on Devlin's first and biggest hit, Lordy Miss Claudie.
I have absolutely lost count now, and I wouldn't have a clue as to what it must have sold. But it must be, I don't think there would be another single, certainly not another local recording that had sold anything like Lordy Miss Claudie.
Hold it, fellas. I don't move. Let's get real gone for change, huh?
baby, yeah, I won't be coming no more. Oh, goodbye, little darling, down the road I go. Yeah.
Despite little radio airplay, Lordy Miss Claudie was an immediate hit in Auckland. With Auckland conquered, it was now time to take Johnny Devlin to points further south. The opportunity to do so that came from a surprising source, the Kerridge Odeon chain of theatres. Graham Dent was a young employee of the Kerridge Odeon empire who had rapidly climbed the corporation ladder after convincing Sir Robert Kerridge to distribute the movie Rock Around the Clock. Promoted by Dent, the film had broken all box office records. Graham Dent had caught Johnny Devlin in action, and like so many others, believed that here was New Zealand's answer to Elvis Presley. The result was an exhausting 6-month tour of Kerridge Odeon theatres, which broke Devlin nationwide with a show that was accompanied by unprecedented teenage hysteria. One-time advisor, Johnny Cooper, remembers his protégé visiting Palmerston North.
When he came out after the show, you couldn't move. The place was packed with screaming teenagers, and there was police everywhere, and the police had to actually escort him across the road to his hotel. And, you know, he was really a superstar.
She wears a straight skirt, ooh-yoo-yoo, straight skirt, ooh-yoo-yoo, straight skirt, ooh-yoo-yoo, well, that's what my baby wears. She wears a tight skirt, ooh-yoo-yoo.
The teenage hysteria which accompanied Johnny Devlin wherever he went may have been unprecedented in New Zealand, but as Phil Warren explains, there was a certain amount of media manipulation involved.
When we used to do his clothing and his jackets up and we were going to pull a stunt, all stunts had to be pre-arranged. And so, you know, we would know the night that we were going to let the people get close to John. And that night, the clothing that he wore would easily tear apart. It was only very lightly stitched together so that, you know, the clothing, other than his vital underwear, would fall off his back. It would be torn off his back, and the press loved all that.
Of course, it didn't matter to Johnny Devlin's legion of fans that the torn shirts and other incidents were ploys to attract media attention. New Zealand teenagers were only interested in the man and his music.
Well, I got a gal with a record machine, and when it comes to rocking, she's a queen. Went up to dance on Saturday night, all alone where I can hold her tight. She lives on the 20th floor uptown. The elevators are broken down. I climb 1, 2, flight 3, flight 4, 5, 6, 7, flight 8, flight more. Up on the 12th, I'm ready to drag. The 15th floor, I'm starting to sag. I get to the top, and we be home to kind of rock. Well, she called me up on the telephone. Said, come on over, honey, I'm all alone. I said, baby, you're really sweet, but I'm in bed with the aching feet. All the kilometers are getting me down. The elevators are broken down. Well, I come 3, flight 4, 5, 6, 7, flight 8, flight more. Up on the 12th, I'm ready to drag. The 15th floor, I'm starting to sag. Get to the top, and I'm too tired to rock.
While one half of the country flocked to see New Zealand's king of rock and roll, the other half were outraged. Concerned citizens wrote letters to the newspapers to express their distaste. In April 1959, concerned about the increasing unease expressed by older members of the community, Sir Robert Kerridge called a halt to the touring Johnny Devlin show. Within weeks, Johnny Devlin was bound for Australia, and although he would enjoy moderate success across the Tasman, his reign as a social phenomenon was over. A self-admitted Elvis Presley imitator, Johnny Devlin can hardly be called an innovator, but as an interpreter of what was essentially an American music form, he was one of the best. And in the quarter century since, no one has ever quite generated the same amount of media attention and teenage hysteria as Johnny Devlin, New Zealand's king of rock and roll. Johnny Devlin, and to a lesser extent Johnny Cooper, were New Zealand's rock and roll pioneers. They firmly established the music in this country. In the next episode, we'll take a look at those who followed, including such artists as Ray Columbus and the Invaders.